All right, so we'll start by saying, Kay Madati, welcome to Crazy Money.
Glad to be here. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Let's go back to the very beginning. Where were you born and what is your full name?
I'm a mess. I was born in Norway, Trondheim, Norway, but I'm a Tanzanian citizen, so I only spent the first 3 months in Trondheim while my mother was finishing her degree at university there. But I'm a Tanzanian citizen. Um, my full name is Kilandigalu Muhammad Madati, but that's why people call me K. It's just a little bit easier.
K is easier, especially for me. My southern tongue doesn't get around those multisyllabic names quite as easily. So what were your family's financial circumstances when you were born?
Um, it's a hard question because um, I didn't know. I can guess. My mother was one of the first women in politics in Tanzania. So she was educated and probably just getting started in her career. My father was a diplomat and an ambassador for Tanzania in a variety of different places, Norway, Saudi Arabia, a couple of different places. Um, so I have no idea what they paid, and I don't know what an African nation paid its foreign service people. But if you're educated in Africa, I think that is wealth said a different way. Right? It might not have been money, but if you had the chance to actually be educated, and mostly probably educated outside the country, that you were lucky.
And how much time did you end up spending in Tanzania as a child?
Just the first 2 years. My mother moved my brother and I to London after my parents got divorced. So I don't really know. I know who my dad is, but he hasn't really been in my life.
So you went to London, and how did you find your way eventually to the United States?
Oh, that's another interesting story. The short answer is that my brother and I were adopted after my mom passed away when we were young. Um, the longer and probably more interesting story is for those first 2 years in Tanzania, my mom had befriended two McKinsey consultants that the government had hired to help plan an 8 to 10 year economic recovery plan. My mother was coordinator of the project from the Tanzanian side. And those two people, Tom and Patricia, or Tosh is her nickname, Tom and Tosh, became close and fast friends to my mother. And when we moved to England, they stayed in touch. Tosh is British and had moved to the States, emigrated to the States as an adult. For those years, they became more family than family, became very close to us and the family. We loved them as children. They showed up for our birthdays and Christmas presents and spoilt us rotten, and became fast part of our extended family. So when my mom got sick, if you ask them, they'll say we didn't want to see people we loved thrown into the British foster care system. And so they took us in, and we sold what little we had in England and moved as two young teenagers to New York City as adopted kids in their instant family. They had just had my youngest brother, who was 5 months old. So they had a baby and two teenagers instantaneously.
And where was this? What location did where did they live?
New York City. So we moved. My mom was a single parent trying to make it in England, and we moved from that to the Upper East Side of New York, which was different.
So anybody listening who's over 45 years old will no doubt have bells ringing that this is reminiscent of the plot of a 1970s TV show called Different Strokes.
The
Two,
real the real
two
life different stroke story. Yes, I that has not lost on me. And I used to joke that that would make me Willis and make my brother Arnold. And we like to tease my youngest brother. That makes him Kimberly.
Kimberly, right. Well, hopefully his life has worked out better than both than Kimberly's, and yours has certainly worked out better than the actor who played Willis.
Yeah, it depends how you measure it, I'm sure.
Well, I think he's had some issues. Anyway, we're not here to disparage him. So you arrive in the United States as you were 13 years old. Is that right?
At 12, yeah, 12 and a half, 1986. Yeah, well, we had been here before. It's actually important to note that Tom and Patricia had so much loved us that in previous years had taken us in for summer vacation. But my mom traveled a lot, and I don't know, starting in like 1970 something, they would volunteer to host us for an entire summer, and we had been flying over to the States where they would rent a house in Connecticut for the summer, and we'd spend like this completely distinctly different summer, or like I don't know, riding horses, learning how to swim, and enjoying life. So
With all
uh,
the other Tanzanian kids in Connecticut.
yeah, we have wonderful pictures. I look at these pictures and are completely unaware of what it looks like to see two nappy-haired black kids riding horses in Greenwich, Connecticut. Like it's just a little bit different. But yeah, that's coming to America for us on some levels, even though it was on the back end of a tragic loss of our mother, was also a rewarding opportunity for a different kind of life.
You told me in a separate conversation that even as a child, as you were at the time, that it was clear to you that this was a surreal thing to do. Were you scared?
Not scared, because we really did love them like family and knew that we were going to be taken care of in all the ways that young children might need to be taken care of. I think, but I was distinctly aware that life had changed. Um, and not just because you have loving parents who maybe can afford to do things that you weren't able to afford to do as a single parent family in London, but more so from. I mean, I remember applying to schools. We arrived in America in the middle of the summer. So if you know a private school in New York or private school anywhere, like most of those applications and have been submitted for 7 months. Like people know, have been told in February that where they're going to go to school. So we arrived in the middle of summer, and only a few schools would even see us. And so going for interviews at schools that were already oversubscribed is also an eye-opening experience. And we ended up at a school named Riverdale, which even then at the time was one of the better schools and private schools in the city. And all of a sudden, teachers are approaching you in different ways. I had never had aspired um, to take the A levels and the O levels in London. I had not aspired to go to university. Like I just didn't think that that was my path. I didn't think I was a quote unquote smart person. And then you suddenly get to this fancy school in Riverdale, the Bronx, and they inspire in you that you can do anything that you want, that you are smart, and that you just need to work at it, and that you can be on the student council, that you can be captain of the soccer team, you can be captain of the track team. I mean, these are all things that nobody had ever thought of me as a leader. Nobody had ever thought of me as somebody who could excel at anything. I had never thought of myself that way, and it's where my passion for education actually begins. I'm happy to talk about that as well, but I fully believe that there's no such thing as dumb kids, only kids that haven't been lit up with the potential. that they might be able to apply against the world, which is why I care so much about education in this country, and that it shouldn't be just bequeathed to the people who can afford to go to fancy schools like I had a chance to do.
What kind of school were you in London?
My mom, again, like, she traveled a lot, so we were in a boarding school, but that doesn't necessarily be no like a good school. That just means um, that we were in the school that looked after us while my mom traveled. I would say if you're lucky enough to get any kind of education in England, in 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 what they call public school is private school in England. So if you're lucky enough to get a public school education, you'll probably doing okay. But I just my adopted mother Tosh would say that my brother and I were the victims of an antiquated caste system and racist system where black kids were never supposed to be anything more than, I don't know, working class. And so we were never. My aperture about what was possible for me might have been driven by my own thoughts, but probably was also driven by the fact that I wasn't ever thought of as anything more than below average. I literally did not think I was going to be anything more than, like, and quite happy, by the way, or anything more than going into the working class, maybe working at a grocery store or something like that. So,
Right.
but, what does a 12-year-old know at that point? So.
So how was the experience of acclimating to school in America? Did the other kids welcome you?
Yeah, Riverdale to this day remains a big part of my heart. Um, we showed up. There were only 110 kids in the class, so very quickly we got to know everybody. Uh, we were different. There wasn't diversity wasn't as much of a thing back then. I think I was only one of four black kids in my class. But a black kid with an English accent with a different kind of story. Slowly, mostly because my brother and I were open about it, people got to hear our stories. So I don't know. There's a lot of empathy about kids who have had to go through things like that at a young age. But it wasn't as hard as I thought. And most importantly, I felt like I was super supported. I am still friends with many of the teachers and deans from that school who have stayed in my life, and have been, you know, a part of all of my successes and trials and tribulations over the years. We were taken in. It made it a lot easier. Everywhere from the minute that we got here, from family to family friends to schools to school friends at school, it made the whole transition a lot easier.
Do you think that the fact that your adoptive parents were people of means and professional success and notoriety, did that help people want to be nice to you?
Um, I I would argue that I no is the answer, and I would argue New York City private school is rife with people of means and influence.
Right. Who,
So
by the way, were pissed off that you guys got into school and their kids didn't get into school. There is somebody that didn't get into Riverdale that was furious when you showed up.
right, well, that's probably right. No, I think as a parent now, I think about what kinds of people would do what they did. And I often tell my friends when I tell the people I meet who are curious enough to ask about my life story, I say, look around to your left and your right and ask yourself, which one of your friends, not family, which one of your friends would take in your kids if the worst thing happened to you? Take in love like their own, invest in like their own financial and emotional security of actually raising your kids, and it's a big thing, and it says a lot about who Tom and Tosh are as people, and their circle of friends and influence. I mean, if you haven't already picked up, they're white and they've adopted two black kids. Um, their circle of influence was wide. I to this day, I think they love Africa more than I love Africa. Like, um, uh, they probably spent more time in the country than I have. When you look at a disparate group of family, friends, and extended, it's every shade, every color of people around the world, and it's actually opened up my perspective about what's important to me in terms of building the network of friends, the family you collect as you go through life, that bring all kinds of different perspectives. So I think if it's not about us, it was about them that we were taken in by their extended family and friends. That it was. I'm not completely sure how we managed to get to the directors of admissions at some of these schools that are already oversubscribed, but it had to be about them and not so much about us, these two young kids. So they're wonderful, wonderful people, human beings for sure. So we're all flawed, but they're aspirational in what I might want for myself.
Did you know how to act and what to wear when you were a newcomer to New York City? Not just New York City, but like Park Avenue, right? The Upper East Side, the most affluent and sophisticated area of the country. Arguably speaking, there are people that think Dallas is that area, but they're delusional.
The answer to that question is no. And there there was an ample share of ignorance, like which actually probably served my brother and I well. Like, if you don't know and you just roll out and you go where you want to go, like um, it's up to the world then to react to that. The answer is no. We showed up. I have this great story about showing up. I came in eighth grade, and my brother came in seventh grade, and it's bar mitzvah season. I had no idea what a bar mitzvah was. And I asked my friend 3 days into school, Judah Pollock, invited me to his bar mitzvah, which was on the weekend. And I was like, "What's a bar mitzvah?" And he said, "It's a party." So I showed up to the Rainbow Room in New York City, 52nd floor of Rockefeller Center, in my best jean jacket and jeans, to a black tie bar mitzvah party. Like, I had no idea. And while there are layers to this story that may highlight the worst of society, I mean, the maitre d' didn't believe that I was a guest, and so sent me to the kitchen. But then I was saved by Judah's mom, who was furious and pulled me into the party. And so there are these great pictures of me surrounded by kids in black tie and me wearing my jeans and my jean jacket. So I did not know how to fit in. I didn't know that you had to fit in. I was just a kid. And my parents, to their credit, are not caught up in all of that nonsense. And so we had an affluent groundedness. And to this day, my parents say, that they're not sure I ever survived, hanging out with all of these wealthy kids. But yeah, we just did our own thing. We were already an odd looking family. We lived in a nice place on the Upper East Side, and there are many stories through my youth where I was stopped by police walking into my own house because they didn't think I'd lived. So there's lots of those kinds of stories, which as I got older, I began to revel in our difference and knew that it wasn't about me. It was about the people who were asking the questions.
In fairness to your story about wearing denim to a bar mitzvah, I wore denim to the Goldberg bat mitzvah in Pacific Palisades last year. So, and I've lived in the United States far longer than you had at the point. But I'm just I'm an ignorant goy. So I hadn't had the intricacies of Los Angeles bar mitzvahs explained to me, except by my knucklehead friend who's the dad who told me that it would be fine.
My adopted father seemed to tell me that I don't think you're supposed to wear jeans, but he was good enough to let me walk out the door like that.
Oh, he'll learn one way or the other, you know. I
That's
mean,
exactly right.
so you said grounded affluence. So how did your adoptive parents address the issue of their affluence and help you understand where you fit into the world at that point?
um, uh, I'm not sure. Um, I, this is it's hard to say, but I'm not sure I ever felt um, wealthy. But objectively, now looking back many years, we're going to one of the top schools in the country. Paying, my parents are paying. There were three boys at one point in our family. I went to Georgetown. My brother went to Stanford. My other brother went to Harvard. And then before that, he was at Andover, the school. So you just put those tuitions
A lot
together
of tuition, right?
in,
Yeah.
in a year. So it's not. We weren't poor by any means. But my let's start with my mother. My mother was British, grew up in probably a middle class, lower to middle class British family. Had come to America to teach tennis at Tufts, and beyond that, had not thought much more about what her future was going to look like. And at Tufts, she met the provost of the school and taught his daughter, and then got to be very close to the family. And the family, he said one day, well, you should apply to Harvard Business School. And she didn't. I mean, maybe this is more lore than fact, but she didn't really know much about it. But applied and became one of the first women to get into. First sets of women to get into Harvard Business School, which is where she met my dad. And he was a Harvard Business School person, and he had finished 3 tours and serving in the military. He was a West Point graduate and was coming back from Vietnam and all of that stuff, and they met there. So I tend to look at them as self-made, hardworking people who have both, in some cases, served this country, and in other cases, in my mom's case, been the benefits of this country. And their first job out of business school was, both of them went to McKinsey, which is still one of the best consulting firms in the world right now. So I think there was a huge connection to work and ethic. I was a better student as I got older. My brothers were both very, very good, and naturally, they did their homework, whereas I waffled through most of it. But the connection of work and the output to success or to winning was very clear. We were not caught up in the fancy vacations. When everybody else went to Aspen for the summer or wherever else, we took the station wagon and we drove to Maine and had an outdoors wedding, outdoor summer. So as much as you can be grounded inside of that world, it's as you can. But I had friends who most certainly had things. I don't know. I kind of, as an outsider looking in, I understood what it was not to have all of this, which was my life in England, and tried to frame it up in a way where you don't get too caught up in it, and don't take it for granted, and realize how lucky you are.
So now your teachers are taking an interest, telling you can be anything you choose to be. Did a world of growing choice, or let me back up. You mentioned you went to Georgetown. I'm curious as to how you got there, and if this new experience of being told that you can do anything, did the infinite choice of where you could go and what you could do with this new opportunity, did that freak you out at all?
Yeah, so it's a multi-layered question. Let's start with um, belief in self and where that came from. Um, over the school and parents instill these. Like when you get voted to lead the soccer team by your peers, you begin to believe in your ability. When you get voted to the student council by your peers in your school, you begin to believe in that people actually want to hear from you, and that you have something to offer. That coupled with the ability to be like, oh, yeah, I sometimes think like, so in my free time, and I've really put my words to action, and I've opened two charter schools, kindergarten through eighth, one in Brooklyn and one in Atlanta. And what's absolutely clear to me, kids only know what they see. So now I'm in this environment where my parents' business friends come over for dinner, or they're supporting a senator on a race or a congressman for a race, and that person is over for dinner. My mother was one of the highest ranking women at the time, well, the highest ranking woman at the time at Xerox, and she ran their biggest division. And she was on all sorts of magazines, cover of Forbes and Fortune and so on and so forth. So you begin, even if I don't understand it all as a kid, you begin to see what's possible. And I think that that's what education at its best really does. It opens up the aperture for a kid to actually dream and think about what's possible for themselves. So it became, whereas I came into that school not really sure that I ever wanted to go to college, by the time I got to 10th grade, there was no choice. It wasn't even, it was like, of course I'm going to college, and of course I'm going to try hard and study and do well on these tests, and apply to a variety of schools. I was lucky that I applied to 6 schools, and I got into every school except Harvard. I got into UPenn, Northwestern, Georgetown, McAllister, Michigan, all great, phenomenal schools. And then had the ability to go out and visit, and this is where I really love my parents. It's something that you don't really appreciate until you're older. You'd have thought that they would have said, on the ranking wise, okay, you're going to the Ivy League, like you're going to that school. But my parents were the opposite. My parents wanted me to go to McAllister in Minnesota. They're like, you're a kid who needs small schools and needs as much attention as possible. Otherwise, it's going to go sideways.
It's a really good school. It's not as well known as Penn, but or
right.
any others.
Right. But they were like, you got to find a school that's the right fit for you. And for a long time, because I ran track, I'd gone to the Penn relays at Penn as a high schooler. And so I was like, I want to go to Penn. And once I got in, I was super excited. And then I visited, and I didn't feel the vibes. And then I visited Georgetown, this jewel in the middle of DC with all of this land and grass. And and so I made a pivot. And listen, you're talking about all great schools. It would not have done wrong in any direction.
If Georgetown's your fallback, you're doing okay.
I was lucky, lucky to go there at that time. You know, this is Alonzo Mourning, Allen Iverson years, like good basketball time.
Right. Great academics, great basketball. What and in the middle of one of the coolest cities in the country. I mean, like it's a great setup. So you've had, you know, I've mentioned this in the introduction that I'm recording separately, but you've had a great career. You've worked at BET, you've worked at CNN, you had leadership roles at Facebook and Twitter. Like, what would Kay Madati have done absent the intervention of your adoptive parents? Where would he have ended up?
Oh, absolutely. I can definitively say I would not be anywhere close to any of these things. I'll tell you. So my first job out of college was at BMW, and I joined in what I don't even know whether it's still around, but they called it a management training program. They took 3 MBA graduates and they took 3 undergraduates. So it was really hard to get into. And that was balanced against going to sell my soul to Goldman Sachs on Wall Street, which and the jobs were great. The Goldman Sachs offer was 3 times as much coming out of college versus BMW. But you know, I'm a kid. I like cars. Like it was not a choice. Like I went to BMW. And I remember on day one, you go, you fill out the HR forms, and then they say, okay, now you got to go to the company garage and pick up your company car, right? And I'd never driven a BMW in my life, and I'm some 20-something-year-old kid, and the guy is literally just handing it to me like it's nothing. Okay, here are the keys, and here are the instructions. Go, go, go. And I went and pulled over into a parking lot, and I just took a breath. I was like, this is not supposed to be my life. Like,
Which model BMW did you choose?
it was a 3 Series coupe. Um, and yeah, it was a surreal moment, and I've had many of them in my life, many of them that have been provided either by family or by work or by virtue of being at Obama's inauguration, serving on one of the presidential councils, sitting next to the CEO of Citibank, who was also on the same council as me, or an ex-British kid attending Wimbledon and sitting uh, in the royal box with the Duke of Gloucestershire right in front of me. Like, I mean, these are places and things that are not supposed to happen in my life, and I am distinctly aware there are, I'd say maybe 4 or 5 times a year where I turn around and you just stop and you pause and you say, I'm lucky. By virtue of a turn of fate, it could be a very different life and a different outcome. And so uh, I'm grateful.
That was my next question. I was like, do you have to remind yourself to be grateful, or does it just continue to hit you over the head on a
No,
regular basis?
there's a fair amount of imposter syndrome. I don't know whether you've heard this thing. Somebody's labeled it, but it's like I it never stops me from doing what I have to do. Even when I got the job at Facebook uh, or got nominated to this presidential council by the president, and so on and so forth. Uh, there's this ability that I'm not supposed to be in the room. This belief, like innately, like because I know where I've come from. Right? That never goes away. I remember who I am. I know what I've been able to accomplish, and I've not been perfect and not been great at everything, but there's always this piece of me that's I should not be here. So I don't need a reminder. It's built into my DNA. The as some people say, I got to get over that imposter syndrome. Sometimes you've just got to be like, you're in the room. You're on this presidential council. There are 30 other people on it. You've got the CEO of the Citibank, the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of America, the CEO of Visa, and you are being asked for your opinion on the same level as these people. You may not be their peers in life, but there's a value that you can contribute here, and the president has asked you to be a part of this. So yeah, I don't think I need any reminders. I am the improbable story of life.
Some people would address imposter syndrome by going over the top with Rolexes and Ferraris and whatever, and like they would try to appear to belong in the room, and in so doing they would make it clear that that they're not that kind of person, that they're trying too hard. And
I don't know any other way to be than just me. It's authenticity. I know that there are like these rules, like how to be a member of the club, what to wear, and then yes, there's certain protocols when you meet royalty, what you're supposed to do, like, and things like that. But beyond that, I'm an anathema to trying to be something that I'm not. I'm just not credible. Most people who try aren't credible. So you're left with, like, you just got to be authentic. And the more that I have tried to be that person myself, the more valuable it's been to me as a human being. It's an easier way to live than trying to fit. I'm not trying to fit in. I certainly like my toys like everybody else.
Right.
But I'm not buying a watch just because apparently you need one to be perceived as a wealthy person. I'll say this, and maybe people will disagree. The insular world of the New York City upper class is not just wealthy people, but arguably some of the most influential people in the country. And money may be where that influence begets itself. And so what I realized very early on, the people with the most influence don't have to tell you in a room. The ones who are loudest are the ones that you should worry the most about.
Well,
But
that's what I was going to say. Well, it's not the person who feels he doesn't belong in the room that you need to watch out for. It's the guy who's like, "Why am I not in charge?"
That's right. That's exactly right. And I mean, we had in my high school parents, the CEO of Sony Corporation. We had the CEO of DLJ, which was one of the big boutique investment banks.
Donaldson, Lufkin, and Red.
Yep, exactly. And a bunch of other muckety mucks parents that I probably don't know. And those people, uh, I don't know, like they had things, but I don't think they had to show things.
You mentioned charter schools. What do you hope to accomplish through your work with charter schools?
I want to model my life. I mean, I mean, the story into how I got pulled into it. I have this very good friend, Omar Wasow, who is an entrepreneur, but now a Princeton professor. Omar grew up in a family with two teachers, and so education was really, really big. He's a really smart person, and he had started a couple of social networks at the time of Friendster that became the largest social networks targeted against Asian population, the African American population, and the Latino population. And this became a huge, big company at the time when social networking. This is pre-Facebook. It's hard to imagine.
Yep.
And Omar and I had become friends. Were introduced at a business thing, but then we became very good friends. And he had said, "Hey, how would you like to help me start a charter school?" Which then pulled me into like, well, what's a charter school, and well, what do we hope to do here? And at the core of my experience is an understanding that education changed my perspective on my life. And so why should that be provided just to somebody who can afford to send somebody to a school like Riverdale?
It didn't just get you into college; it changed your perspective on your life.
Absolutely, absolutely. And those are two very different things. Like there's the functional, like, okay, you got into a good college, but really your perspective on how you looked at the world, and what was possible for you in explicit and non-explicit ways. Like finding out what a CEO of Sony is and did. I mean, I got to meet Michael Jackson because of him, because Michael Jackson was a Sony artist.
How's your therapy going?
It was at the bad concert days. It was a wonderful.
Okay, good. You're at
But even learning what that was and what a job was, like how does this guy know Michael Jackson and why does he get to take me here? It just opens your aperture as to like, oh, maybe I want to do that, you know. And so I wanted my passion for joining Omar on this adventure that I knew very little about, came from like, I want to replicate what I did to kids who would never have that opportunity. And I don't think that money needs to do it. And so charter schools at its essence allow for that kind of vision to come to life. We failed the first two times. We applied to New York City charter schools and we were rejected. We pulled together a board and the packet, we were rejected 2 years in a row. And on the third year, 1999, our proposal got accepted. After interviewing with like New York State Secretary of Education. I mean, it's a big vetting process and a big deal. And then before you know it, we're breaking ground in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn on a $15 million building and applying. My perspective is like, what do I know about education? But I know what it takes to build an enterprise and to apply my business acumen to helping get a school off the ground and hire teachers and principals and stuff like that. And so that's where it came from. That my passion for charter schools. I avoid the politics around it and just think about, like, if this school did not exist in this community in Brooklyn, 750 kids would be stuck in failing public schools. That is an actual fact. It's not hyperbole. For those 750 kids and their extended families, the ability to have gotten a lottery ticket and attend this school has changed the trajectory of their education, their lives, the potential, the way that they think about the future, which is what happened to me at Riverdale.
Do you think a poor kid in America can make it on hard work alone?
No. No, because educational systems fail poor people, disadvantaged neighborhoods. Um, our school population in Brooklyn is mostly single parent family, so single parent and working family. So we had to actually open it and think about, like, what do we do with the kids between 3 and 6, because the parents aren't home, right? You send the kids home at 3, there's no oversight. So everything that you might have worked on in school suddenly gets thrown out the window until somebody's actually looking after the kids. So we actually stay open a lot longer. Our programs run deeper into the day, and we have after school programs that most of the kids subscribe to as well. So no, I don't think, I know that this country is built on this vision of, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but the playing field isn't even. And I'm a perfect example of that. Right? I'm a Black kid that got adopted into a wealthy family, and suddenly my trajectory changes. What's changed? Well, you look at the data on that. It's access to great teachers, access to great schools, access to people who actually instill a sense of confidence in you in different ways that you may not be getting at home, and the ability, like when I wasn't doing well on the SAT test, my parents could afford to send me to Kaplan. Right? So now that's not an even playing field against the kid from public school who might have to walk his way to school through neighborhoods and an environment that isn't conducive to telling you you're the best thing in the world. Show up at a school where you hopefully have teachers who are going to invest in you. New York City public schools averaging 45 kids in the area of Brooklyn, 45 kids per class. Wow. So if you're not naturally good, you're not getting looked after, right? Like, you're not, or the entire class is slowed down, which is what we actually found. It's not that public school teachers are bad people. It's that you can't manage a class with 45 kids, right? And so you end up teaching to the lowest common denominator, which means any kid who's good at anything is actually being held back. So it's not an even playing field. It's actually one of America's biggest failings as far as I'm concerned. Urban school, public, actually not even urban school. You could get to places like West Virginia where you got the same problem done in a different way. Like, it's amazing to me that we don't invest more, that it's not at the top of every ballot ticket, that people don't run on like, let's get our kids educated. Let's provide them semi-level a playing field and the opportunity to participate. One of our biggest learnings when we opened the school. So we opened the school kindergarten through 8th. But what you learn is the trajectory of a kid's learning can only be affected at extreme amounts, like at the early years. And so if you have a 5th grader to a 6th grader, your ability to actually change the trajectory of the learning is lessened. And so you need to start earlier. So we actually opened the school kindergarten through 5th and grew up into the 6th or 7th and 8th grade years. Because when we took in, because we're a lottery school, you take in whoever is lucky enough to get in. We found that most of the kids were a grade to a grade and a half behind. And so we had to, like, create after school programs, tutoring opportunities, and so on and so forth to get everyone caught up. But what we realized was, so after a couple of years, we had a really well-functioning and operating school. But what you realize is that's not where the story ends. When you get to 7th grade, what we realized was if you don't actually get the kids out of Brooklyn, they won't ever apply for scholarships at the private schools in New York City because the majority of our kids have never been out of Brooklyn, which is hard to imagine. It's a train ride into Manhattan, right? And so we started creating bus tours, and we would call all of these private schools, and we grab the parents and the kids. We sometimes got schools to see us on weekends, and we would bring them to these schools that they would never have ever thought to apply. Look at Dalton, look at Riverdale, look at Horace Mann.
They've got to look like Hogwarts to these kids.
Right. It's very, very different. And not every kid in our graduating eighth graders are going to be able to get into this, but 3 to 4 could out of a class of whatever it was, 30 kids. And they could probably qualify for scholarships and they could get a chance. So it's not just about getting the kids educated. It's also exposing them to more than what they see in their daily lives. Like I had a parent tell me at the 8th grade graduation, our board was all young-ish people, except one person who was an ex-principal. And we were all mostly people of color. We had a majority people of color board. And a parent came up to me and says, you have no idea what it's like for me and my family and my kids to look up at successful people of color. Like they don't see this. They see rappers and basketball players and et cetera, but they don't actually see, like my friend James Bernard, who was one of our core board members, founded The Source magazine. Omar is an entrepreneur, founded Black Planet, Asian Avenue, and all of these social networks. I was working at BMW at the time as an executive there. We had a principal at school. I mean, these present opportunities and windows to how kids and people can actually dream differently and dream to be different things. I'm not suggesting that people wanted to become us, but the connection between what we were doing at the school and your future becomes more tacit.
Just because you can give them an example that they can say, oh, I could see me doing that. I could be like that guy.
Absolutely. And we did lots of things with career things. We leveraged our own Rolodexes to bring people to the school, councilmen to the school. Our Brooklyn school has become a really big part of that community. That's the other thing. The school is not just the education place. We open up on the weekends for community events and stuff like that. So being a part of the actual part of Bed-Stuy has been critical too.
Well, the work you all are doing sounds amazing, and I'm so glad you're there to do it as an example, not just of success, but of humility and just all around good guidance. So,
well, I unfortunately I had to resign from the board. I couldn't commute to Brooklyn for the monthly board meetings anymore, but I am still connected
from Los Angeles. We're not talking about a train ride. It's from LA. Okay.
That's right. The same thing happened in Atlanta. For a little while I was doing the Atlanta school, but even that got hard.
Would it make sense to put a link to the school's resources so if anybody was interested, they could make a donation to those schools?
Absolutely. Atlanta Heights Charter School and Brooklyn Excelsior Charter School. So those are 2 schools. Yeah, we should do that.
Okay, so those, so we will put links in the show notes if you are interested in finding out more about those 2 schools. Kay, one last question. You've got an 11-year-old daughter. What kind of values around money and work and success do you want to pass on to her?
Yeah, well, she has 2 parents who work really hard, and it's interesting. By osmosis, she already connects the way that we live to the amount of work that we do.
Oh, that's interesting.
On some levels, it's probably not what a parent wants a kid to understand as early as she has, but my ex is a OBGYN. I'm in tech and business land, and we both work a lot. My ex does overnights in the hospital often. She has long days from 7 a.m. sometimes to 7 or 8 p.m. While we prioritize spending our downtime with our daughter, she has understood that both her parents work really hard, and because they work really hard, that's how we get to live. I am probably a little bit dogmatic about trying to do what my parents did with me, which is like, you all, she has a distinct awareness that her life is lucky as well. Like she goes to a fancy school here in Beverly Hills. We don't have some of the things that other people have, but we have a very good life. And she is lucky enough to have a computer at home and doesn't have to borrow one from the school. And I think as a young 11-year-old, I'm pretty proud of how she's aware that things are special. So I want her to know to work hard. I want her to, more importantly, actually before all of that stuff, I think I just want her to be a kind and generous kid in a world that is increasingly not emphasizing that in children. She's a good kid, and if she could have some version of the life that I built, where we have an extended group of friends and family, all my parents have built, that's win number one. And secondly, yeah, I want her to work hard, but I also want her to like chase her passions. Like we don't let her quit things when she starts. Like so, if she says she's doing piano, she's doing it for the whole semester, even though she may hate it halfway through. So there's values that we've learned along the way that are embedded. But she's a good kid. I'm lucky.
Well, if kindness and generosity are hereditary, and I believe they are, then she's off to a really good start with you as a dad. So thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I know our listeners are going to find your story very compelling.
Thanks for the questions. I don't talk about this stuff that often, so it's odd, but thank you.
I appreciate you sharing them with us. Thanks a lot, Kay.
All right.